More than ever we must show discipline, tolerance, and production to build a strong and better nation. I say that is the main foundation. So come let us go hand in hand, because this is our land. Come my brother, come my sister, and let us build a nation together.
Come, my brother, come, my sister, and let us build Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique together. I want to welcome you to the Dynamic Hour. Again, we have a unique opportunity to talk using social media and radio to connect. I want to encourage those who are viewing me on Facebook and YouTube, please share the live. Sharing is caring. When you share the live, you give your friends that opportunity to be a part of the conversation. I want to start off today by examining Brian Grimes as the president of the Public Workers Union and also looking at some of the things he said and what government was able to deliver on for public workers. And being more specific, we want to look deeper into pension. We want to look deeper into the whole issue of regularization, because that's important. That's very important. So that is exactly what I will do at this point in time. So let me start off by playing for you what was recently talked about. It was in the news and many people saw it. So Brian Grimes came on and he was speaking about, the whole issue of pension, regularization, contract workers, and so on. The guy's out there. The guy is talking often on these issues. So I want to start off by playing that piece, all right? Because there's a lot out there being talked about. So let me first play this.
Union President Brian Grimes has voiced his discontent, calling out the government for allegedly issuing contracts to nurses with inaccurate salary figures, which he says is illegal.
The nurses are being asked to sign contracts where, for example, the contract says 2020 to 2024. In a sense, is a whole contract. Remember, they were promised permanency. Remember that. But I'm going past that. The contract would say your salary per annum is $45,000. But in reality, you are making $30,000 per annum. Tell me, isn't there something potentially illegal in that? So you refuse to make them permanent, and then you're insulting them by giving them backdated contracts with inflated figures.
Right. So this guy made this pronouncement on GBN News. Well, that piece made GBN News. So I was listening to a talk show program during this week, and a caller answered this guy nicely, rebutted this guy nicely. I recognized the caller's voice to be Jude Bernard. All right? I recognize the voice to be Jude Bernard. And I want to play that for you because you see, this guy believes that he's smart, but he's not. There are people out there who listen, who analyze, and who can actually do way better in terms of explaining certain things than this guy. So I want to play that piece for you because I think the individual did a good, made a good contribution on that program on GBN with Innocent.
As yet.
They were given contracts to sign retroactively from 2020 to 2024. And they said, why would they do that to these people? And this is total deception. Let me say something here. I think the public servants deserve better in terms of representation. There was a case, again, just as what the first caller said, of matters that were left unhandled. These people were working for years. They were being paid the same thing as the public service appointed workers. Now, there was a time now for them, the others, to get increments. They couldn't get increments. They had no contract. They were just working from month to month, or whatever arrangement they had. So what the government did was to retroactively give them a contract to cover that industrial agreement period, so that they will be entitled to the increments as well at the end of that contract. And here was the president who should be representing them and seeking their interests, saying that it is deception. Here is an attempt to bend backwards to help these people. But now their leader is selling it as deceit. Now whose interests is he serving? They deserve better. And I just hope that they could get rid of this kind of elements to enable the public servants. That's why we have this kind of incompetence everywhere, because they're supported by people at the head who don't seem to know what from what.
Right. So that caller was very correct. We heard P.S. Marshall speaking to workers within the system without any instrument, without any contract, without any letter from PSC, without anything, but they are working. They are employed. They are not established worker. They are not appointed and confirmed by the Public Service Commission, but they are employed. But remember, this government agreed with the union for the first time to give contract workers the same increase as permanent workers within the public service for the very first time. 2023, 2024, 2025. That is important to put this whole thing in context. So they have to get that increase. But if they don't have an instrument, if they don't have a contract, and some of them started working a year ago, 6 months ago, way before, right? Some of them did a year and some 2 years, 3 years. So they are entitled to that increase. But let me play that for you because Brian Grimes himself spoke about that when the government signed that agreement with the Public Workers Union when they negotiated for the increase. He spoke about that somewhere. He spoke about that. Let me try to get it for you.
The whole package. In my view, yes, we did not get all that we asked for, but I think this particular negotiating cycle, this particular period has been groundbreaking, right? The first thing in terms of big ticket items, I want to speak on it because it's important to celebrate our victories, small and large. This is the first fringe benefit agreement we would have had in over 10 years. That is very, very significant. I think both the employer and the unions and workers should be happy about this. Very, very importantly, and I know I was speaking to a contract worker up here, this package has in it a clause stating contract workers will get the increases, even fixed term contract workers. This is monumental. This is groundbreaking. In the past, we have had very, very serious battles with the past administration in terms of members of our bargaining unit being left out in terms of their ability to secure increases. So having now enshrined in our agreement stating that contract workers will get it, it may have some administrative hiccups in terms of, you have a little extra work to do, but I think it's worth it in terms of the justice and the equity across the public service. So
right. So I wanted to play that. I will get back to that clip, but that part in particular. So you have contract workers now entitled to that increase, that 13% increase, just like permanent workers. And that's the first time that has ever happened for public workers who are on contract. So if you are working with government and you have no contract, no letter, no nothing, how then do they pay you that increase? How then do they give you that increase? And I think that is what Jude was actually speaking about. So they have to get some instrument. They have to be covered. They need something which says that they were employed on this date for this period, and the government can work on that so that they can get that increment or that increase. So Brian Grimes seemed to be either plain dumb or plain stupid, because he should know that is the reason why the contracts are backdated or retroactive, because they were never covered. And look, this same Brian Grimes is making pronouncements about government being anti-worker, this government being anti-worker, this same Brian Grimes. I laugh because you heard this guy a while ago. All the achievements, and it's monumental, it's groundbreaking, it's historic, and
we wrote to logically think. It is there. So the tit for tat is unnecessary. Let those people with logical minds analyze. And I know our workers, by and large, understand the struggle the union is going through on their behalf. We are only getting empty promises. And on top of that, our workers are being tricked. Our workers are being disenfranchised because there is an agenda that is anti-worker.
Right, so that's Brian Grimes. That's Brian Grimes. But you just heard a while ago Brian Grimes talking about all the benefits that the worker got under this government. I just played it a while ago for you. All right. But then you heard this guy on the other side of his tongue talking about anti-worker, and this government is, look.
The whole package.
And maybe you could,
in my view, yes, we did not get all.
Maybe you could write down some of the things that this guy actually said the government gave to the worker or the workers in this package. Sometimes you need to write it down, document it, take your time and write it down so you can remind this guy, because he's now saying that this government is anti-worker. But this was the guy a couple months ago praising the government.
That we asked for. But I think this particular negotiating cycle, this particular period has been groundbreaking, right? The first thing in terms of big ticket items, I want to speak on it because it's important to celebrate our victories, small and large. This is the first fringe benefit agreement we would have had in over 10 years. That is very, very significant. I think both the employer and the unions and workers should be happy about this. Very, very importantly, and I know I was speaking to a contract worker up here, this package has in it a clause stating contract workers will get the increases, even fixed-term contract workers. This is monumental. This is groundbreaking. In the past, we have had very, very serious battles with the past administration in terms of members of our bargaining unit being left out in terms of their ability to secure increases. So having now enshrined in our agreement stating that contract workers will get it, it may have some administrative hiccups in terms of, you have a little extra work to do, but I think it's worth it in terms of the justice and the equity across the public service. So this is tremendous as far as the union is concerned. Now, there are some other items here. Nurses have been clamoring for it for an extended period of time. Free medicine at the hospital, a la our friends in the police service. I'm not going to call them the police force, the police service, the Prime Minister. Yeah.
Yes, the police is here.
Yeah. So nurses and doctors will be able to get free medicine, right? And this is something, like I stated, they have been clamoring for years. So now it has become a reality. It has come to fruition. Very, very important, and this one is very dear to me, the ex gratia. Unestablished workers are going home at times with minuscule, sometimes embarrassingly low monthly payments after they would have retired. One something, whatever it is, 300 if some are lucky. But now, the Grenada Public Workers Union have negotiated with government, and government have agreed that the minimum unestablished workers will go home with, the minimum, the bare minimum would be $500. It is a step in the right direction, right? Last but not least, I'm not going to speak about the uniform allowances and so forth. We have, should I?
No.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
All right, okay. Last but not least, very, 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 very important is the fact that this government has agreed to pay in terms of our health insurance, because we have a medical health insurance with Sagico, 55%, and the members will pay 45%. This is significant. In the past, the government used to pay 50%. They are now paying 55%. But apart from that, there were changes that had to take place with the plan, amendments to increase the schedule of benefits, and we were not getting that traction in terms of cooperation in the past. But now we have a situation, a positive situation, where government say, listen, health insurance is not a luxury, it's basically a need, and we're going to make it affordable for the members. So very soon you'll be hearing us coming to you members, aggressively marketing this very important instrument for your good. So our health insurance will be on the up and up going forward, thanks to this particular agreement. So I think we need a table knock for that also. And I think I should mention it, the last thing, there is a clause in there. Nobody wants to die or prepare for death necessarily, but there is a clause in there that if one dies in service, your beneficiary will be able to get your salary for 1 year. These are important. Family is an important institution, and if something happens to you, you would hope that there's at least a stopgap for a temporary period for your family members to have some, economic space, so to speak. So I think this is a tremendous, and these are just the big ticket items within the package. This is a tremendous package, and I think all.
So that's Brian Grimes telling us about the gains, telling us about the big ticket items that this government was able to give to the workers. But you heard him a while ago speaking about anti-worker and the government this and the government that. Only recently he said so. I just played the piece a while ago. So I'm a bit confused with this guy, all right? I'm a bit confused with him. I don't know which one I should believe. Is it this one?
President Brian Grimes has voiced his discontent. Consultations with stakeholders resemble a dictatorship rather than an open discussion.
Now, a lot of talk is being bandied about consultations and this, and the union has been engaged. I would want to posit here today that the so-called consultations were basically public service announcements on steroids. The consultations were public service announcements on steroids. So basically, you come, you say this is what it is, before introductions have taken place or has passed, and you say this is a consultation, this is engagement. But they are just telling us what is going on.
Permanent Secretary Marshall has strongly refuted this claim.
I would assume that if I invite you to a meeting to discuss a matter, I share with you the documentation and I share with you my views and allow you to share your views, that to me is a discussion and a consultation. I can't see that as being dictatorial in any way at all. So usually that's what the format is. We send you the documentation, we invite you to a discussion, we come to the discussion, we share.
That was not the piece I wanted to play for you, all right? That was not the piece I wanted to play for you. I wanted to play the piece I played before. So many things here to go into the this one. I wanted to play.
The evidence is there for all who want to listen, and for all who have eyes to see, and for all who have ears to hear, and for all who have brains to logically think. It is there. So the tit for tat is unnecessary. Let those people with logical minds analyze. And I know our workers, by and large, understand the struggle the union is going through on their behalf. We are only getting empty promises. And on top of that, our workers are being tricked. Our workers are being disenfranchised because there is an agenda that is anti-worker.
So, this guy's confused, huh? He's totally confused. Because you heard the guy say it was the first fringe benefit package in 10 years that they were able to get from government. 10 years. The previous administration never gave them that. So they got a fringe benefit package. The guy spoke about contract workers getting the same increase as established workers or permanent workers, the 13% increase. He spoke about nurses and doctors getting free medication at the hospital. He spoke about the ex gratia payments for unestablished workers. They were going home with nothing or very little. So the government agreed that none of them would go home with less than $500 per month coming from government. All right? He spoke about the health insurance that the government is now, that the government increased from 50% to 55%. That is what the government is paying for the worker, an increase of 5%. He spoke about if a employee dies during work, all right, employed, not retired, employed during the time of work, that employee family will get the same salary that they were getting for 1 year. So the government gave all of this. And also pension and other things like that. How could this statement from this guy be true regarding the government being anti-worker? It just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. But the piece I played for you with Jude Bernard speaking to this guy's arrogance and his stupidity was when this guy went on, it was on GBN News, and he said this.
President Brian Grimes has voiced his discontent, calling out to the government for allegedly issuing contracts to nurses with inaccurate salary figures, which he says is illegal.
The nurses are being asked to sign contracts where, for example, the contract says 2020 to 2024. In a sense, is a whole contract. Remember, they were promised permanency. Yeah? Remember that. But I'm going past that. The contract would say your salary per annum is $45,000. But in reality, you are making $30,000 per annum. Tell me, isn't there something potentially illegal in that? So you refuse to make them permanent. And then you're insulting them by giving them backdated contracts with inflated figures. Absolute deceit. Where are we going? Why are we treating our health sector workers in this fashion? This is so strange.
In response, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell stated that he is unaware of the existence of such contracts, while Permanent Secretary in the Department of Public Administration, Lindonna Marshall, offered a different perspective on what might have occurred.
Well, I think, that's a question I can't answer. I haven't seen the contract. I don't think the PS has seen the contract. I don't know who the nurse is. I can't, and I'm taking what you say at face value. I can't even see the veracity of the document. So it's not even something I could speak to. And
We've had people, from the functional review, we noticed a number of people had no instruments. So there was no coverage at all. So in order to give them the comfort that they were seeking, we gave coverage. So for example, somebody worked without an instrument for 5 years, we would give you a cover for the 5 years. But it has nothing to do with change in salary in terms of you on the contract, there's more than what you receive. Would you agree to receiving a contract that says more and you're actually paid less without asking a question? I can't see anybody holding a contract in their hand for 40,000 and you're receiving 30. That doesn't make any sense to us at all. But we would, if that is the case, then we would love to see it and remedy whatever the situation is.
Grimes also criticized the government for a lack of communication with the union, suggesting that consultations with stakeholders resemble a dictatorship rather than...
Right. So, we have had enough from Grimes there. But I'm saying the permanent secretary explained this thing nicely. All right? Because you have workers who are actually working within the public service without any instrument, without any contract, without any letter, without anything. But they're working and they're collecting a salary every month. But they have to get the increase. How do they then get the increase without a contract, without some kind of document to show that they were working from this time to that time? And that is why I played the Jude Bernard piece, because I think he answered Brian Grimes well when it comes to what Brian said in that GBN piece.
As yet.
They were given contracts to sign retroactively from 2020 to 2024. And they said, why would they do that to these people? And this is total deception. Let me say something here. I think the public servants deserve better in terms of representation. There was a case, again, just as what the first caller said, of matters that were left unhandled. These people were working for years. They were being paid the same thing as the public service appointed workers. Now, there is a time now for them, the others, to get increments. They couldn't get increments. They had no contract. They were just working from month to month, or whatever arrangement they had. So what the government did was to retroactively give them a contract to cover that industrial agreement period, so that they will be entitled to the increments as well at the end of that contract. And
so you see, Jude is correct and the PS is correct. This thing is kind of common sense. But here it is. This Brian Grimes is speaking about anti-worker and they ain't get this and they ain't get that. Here it is. During NNP time, the workers who were unestablished, on contract, they were not getting any increase, No.
Earlier today, the Public Workers Union president indicated that it was the hope of the executive to celebrate yet another victory. However, some workers' salaries are not reflecting the proposed increase that government promised. According to Brian Grimes,
Right. And folks, that's a very old piece of clip. All right. That's not current. It's an old piece of clip with Brian Grimes speaking there about workers not seeing the increase in their salaries. That was under the NNP time, not the NDC, under the NNP time.
Some of the workers have been disenfranchised. Grimes says some of the workers who were disenfranchised this time around received increases in the past. He questions what has changed between then and now.
A number of workers have called
our organization complaining that they have not gotten their increases despite being part of our bargaining unit and despite paying union dues religiously and perpetually. Among those are those who got increases in 2020. Among those phone calls, we have gotten people who are even under Public Service Commission contracts saying that they have not gotten.
The union, he says, is addressing the matter with some form of urgency.
We have subsequently written to the permanent secretary, who is also a member, coincidentally, of the Department of Public Administration to get clarification on this matter. We do not want to be irresponsible and be judgmental and say it was simply an accounting move on the part of government, which in its very nature would be malicious against a certain section of our workers.
Some workers, he claims, have been working for approximately 20 years on contract. And
right. So let us get into that. This guy that's during NNP time, eh? Yeah, NNP time. The contract workers, they never got any increase. Right? They never got any increase. That's Brian Grimes there. But here it is. He made a statement there where he spoke about he doesn't want to go to the point to say, well, it was some accounting error, some kind of problems to that effect. And then he used the word malicious against a certain group of workers. All right? You remember, we were talking about what happened with the late salaries. And this guy came out and defended the workers at the Ministry of Education when the teachers did not get their money. And I said, this is sabotage, this is inside work and so on. And there's a level of jealousy against the teachers. But here is this guy, and that's years ago.
Be judgmental and say it was simply an accounting move on the part of government, which in its very nature would be malicious against a certain section of our workers.
Right. Which by its very nature would be malicious against a certain section of our workers. So this guy believes that he's smart, right? But he's not. The evidence is that he speaks too much. So the evidence is there to show. But here it is. The contract workers, they were not getting any increase. I remember my good friend stood in protest for that.
President of the Public Workers Union, Finbert Thomas, says he is willing to sacrifice his 4% salary increase. On Friday, he took a stand in solidarity with contract workers who he believes were unfairly treated, as they, according to him, have not tasted a slice of the cake shared among public servants.
As you have noticed, at the end of August, as the minister said, all public officers will receive a 4% increase. As to this day, there have been many contract workers who have been in the system 10 years, 11 years, 15 years, performing duties.
Right. Let me see again that this is an old clip. This is not recent. This is an old clip of Finbert Thomas, my good pal. He was a part of the union at the senior level. And he stood in protest with the fact that contract workers were not getting that 4% because the government said you're not entitled to that. All right? So that was an old clip.
That has permanent status and has not received the 4% increase. I'm here today because this is really unfair. The minister said it. The minister said it. All public officers are going to receive the 4%. To this day, these workers are disenfranchised. They have.
Government had promised that by August end, public servants will be paid their 4%. According to Thomas, some of the officers have benefited thus far.
Be an hypocrite to sit in the service and work alongside contract workers who are performing duties on a lasting basis and receive a 4% and they are disenfranchised and haven't received a 4%. Urge the government to pay those workers their 4%.
Right. So, folks, that is an old clip, you know. All right? It's an old video. And you heard Mr. Thomas there speak. He's no longer on the executive of the union. he's speaking there saying, hey, these contract workers, they are doing the same work like established workers, and they did not get the 4%. They did not. So the NNP never engaged in any conversation whatsoever with contract workers. No, they would not give them no increase. The very first time contract workers, fixed term contract workers, you're talking about the contract says this is the amount of money that person will work for every month for 1 year or 2 years. Fixed with all the benefits in there. They too got an increase in their salary. So FIMBA, there years ago, saying, hey, the NNP should give these people a 4% too. But they didn't bother with the union then. No, the NNP never gave them any 4%. But I thought I should play that for you because it is important to remind the workers that what you're enjoying today under the NDC, don't believe it was something that you were enjoying under the NNP. Because that was not the case. Under the NNP was actually hiring people on contracts straight. You remember the Imani trainees and some different programs that they had, and they actually said that they put them in this grand case thing and grand this thing, contract for hire, contract for service. That's what the NNP was doing.
Of batch 1 to 6 in the new Imani program will soon receive permanent work positions through service of contract or otherwise in and out of the public sector. The transition process and strategy will benefit the remaining 1,600 from the 5,000 trainees that was registered into the program during 2013 to 2018. The announcement was made by Minister with Responsibility for Youth Development, Kate Lewis.
The aim of the transition process is to change the status of trainees from being an Imani trainee to become employees in various organizations, for service providers and other such entities. Given the large number of trainees to be transitioned and the multiple sectors where our trainees are dispersed, we have decided to use a phased approach to this transition process.
The minister said already some trainees have started their transition process.
The implementation of the transition strategy includes the ongoing process of hiring by private sector businesses, public sector and NGOs, procurement of services in areas of the public sector, and this will be done through individual service contracts where possible, or through service providers. The operationalization of the Garment Production Cooperative and the entrepreneurship through youth biz, giving the trainees the opportunity to set up their own businesses.
Lewis outlined how the transition process and strategy will occur.
Thus far, on July 1st, 287 trainees were transitioned, and they include 138 who were assigned to the Ministry of Health in areas including maids, dietary aides, and clerks, and another 149 trainees that were assigned to the Ministry of Social Development as geriatric and roving caregivers. These trainees were hired by Grencase, and the government has procured the services from Grencase through a contract for service.
Right. So it's all through a contract for service. So the NNP was hiring these people and placing them on contract. You see, today's program is for you to understand what was taking place under the NNP and what is happening now under the NDC. So the NDC inherited that problem with 3,600 and something workers unestablished. They're on contract for service, and so on and so forth. All right, within the government. But the NNP hired these people. They did not hire them and make them permanent. They left them on contract. And they were retiring without a pension. And that is what we're getting to. All right, so they were not getting any increase. They were not permanent. they were hired on contract, and that is what the NNP was actually doing for all these years. So the 3,000 plus workers, the majority of them were hired under the NNP, but on contract. On contract. And they were retiring back into poverty because they were going home with no pension, no pension whatsoever. They were just retiring and going home with no pension. So the government now, the NDC administration, the most honorable Deacon Mitchell and his team, they realize that these people are working, and when they retire, they're going home with no pension, zero pension. So what did the government do? The government say, hey, we need to do something about that. We need to help these workers. So when they go home, they get in a pension, and they would live a little, more comfortably. They would be able to take care of themselves. That is what the government is trying to do. But Brian Grimes object to the government trying to come up with this new pension scheme, and workers having to contribute 3%, and the government would contribute 3%. So the guy is angry, he's pissed. All right? He's blue. How that could be the case? And he has all kind of explanation and all kinds of things to say. But here it is. It is important that we put this thing into perspective. All right? Because regularization is going on. Things are happening. The guy came out. Remember, he talked about if you go in the ministry and you ask people if they get regularized, very few or little, nobody could, what's that effect would tell you that they got regularized. But the PS in DPA came out and tell us, clear cut, 404 public officers were actually made permanent. All right? 404 were actually regularized or made permanent. So Brian Grimes making certain statements out there, sometimes you just have to laugh at the guy. So Fimba Thomas did a nice piece recently because he got regularized.
I want to talk a bit on the commotion about the regularization of public officers and the pension. Now, I'll give a little testimony. I've been acting in a position for almost 8 years under the previous administration, and it reached a point where I was told that I'll be acting indefinitely, which in the public service rules and regulations is illegal. You can't have someone acting beyond 2 years. I think I want to believe 2 years. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it was a little bit frustrating for me. I felt like nobody was paying attention to me, and you're performing your duties, you're working very hard, and for so long you're just acting in the position, and you're not confirmed in the position. And when you're not confirmed in a position, it could affect you in terms of when you retire. You will retire with your substantive post rather than the post that you was acting in and performing the duties in. And the new administration took over, and within a year and a half I was regularized. So when they gave their mandate that they were going to do the regularization in phases, as I'm a permanent public officer, I was in the first batch of the 300 who were regularized. And I just point out this because we rant and we rave and we create unnecessary uproar rather than we work together to help the process move a little bit faster. So I just wanted to point out that they are working on getting. It's not a walk in the park. It's not an easy process, but they have started regularizing persons, and I am one of the persons who have been regularized and currently appointed in the position I've been acting in for the past 8 years. So, and this happened in less than no time within the year span that they said they were going to regularize person, the first 300. So sometimes we hear people make a bunch of noise in the market and believe fish is selling, but not all noise that is being made that means fish is selling. It's a process and it's happening. I could testify that I have been regularize. I also want to point out that when you have heads of departments, and I am a fair, just person when it comes to a balance and level playing field. Injustice I don't like, I don't take sides, and I'll be blunt and I'll be very clear. When you have heads of departments, we must also make sure that we hold persons accountable and have them perform their duties in a timely manner. Sometimes we love to point fingers and play the blame game, but at times we have to hold persons accountable and make sure that they are doing their jobs and they are doing it to the best of their ability. You have an agenda, you have to make sure that the agenda that you have is for the benefits of workers and make sure that it is get done in a timely manner. I am not going to, play politics or play jack and boot. I'm not going to do that. Right is right, fair is fair, just is just. I also want to point out that with the pension, we must, give kudos to the new administration, because imagine there were persons on contract for years in the service, for a lot of years. And imagine you work 15, 18, 20 years to go home with nothing, to go home in poverty. And imagine this administration took it upon themselves to, create a new pension plan for those persons who are in the service under contract and various contracts. And I mean, we have to count our blessings, and all the time, it warrants us making unrest and making war. Sometimes we have to facilitate the process and help the process, because as far as I see it, introducing a pension plan for workers who've been in the system for so long is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. At least these workers will have the opportunity to go home with something in their pocket, to go home knowing that they could finish pay off their mortgage, or they could finish pay for children to go to university, or whatever. They have monies that they could invest in, after they leave. They could have their own businesses and stuff, operate their own thing. So I find it's a good thing that the administration is trying to, be worker friendly and try to help the worker as much. We wouldn't always get it right. And I just want to say, and just want to be clear, that instead of we making all the noise and we discriminating and coming down against this and against that, and we want it done fast, and we want it, that is a process, and the public service has been broken for years. The public service wasn't something that was inherent with goal, or something that was so nice and pretty and everything is well, and they inherited a public service that is very broken. And instead of we ranting and raving about things conveniently, there are a lot of other issues in the public service that need fixing. And for example, occupational health and safety. There are many workers who work in offices where you have ACs that haven't been cleaned for years. You have places where you have files in office sharing, you have cabinets and files sharing the same office with workers, and you have workers who may retire and fall sick and never get the opportunity to enjoy a pension or to enjoy their retirement.
Yeah, so that was Fimba Thomas there. Very, very powerful piece, I must admit. A very sober piece too. Speaking to the new pension, speaking to regularization. 404 workers have already been regularized. But you don't expect the government to just regularize everybody like that. You see, that is what Brian Grimes wants. But he doesn't understand. It's not sustainable. Or he plain, he don't understand. It's not sustainable. So these contract workers, they have been in the system for years without a plan, without a pension. So they're going home upon retirement. When they reach 60, they're going home with nothing. They're going home with Zero. All right? But here it is. Brian Grimes spoke about this whole issue and what it would do to the workers. But do you know that the same union that Brian Grimes is the head of, they intend to increase the union dues on the lower end of workers, the simpler workers, those that are working for very little, under 1,500, so to speak.
Earlier today, the Public Workers Union president indicated that it was the hope of the executive to celebrate yet another victory.
Not this one. I want to play that piece for you where he was interviewed by Callistra Faria. He was interviewed by her, and he spoke about that there.
Grimes disclosed that there are disparities in salaries among public officials who must be regularized before they can sustain regular contributions. To the soon should be implemented new pension scheme.
There is an issue with us having over 1,000 workers. 1,000 workers working for under $1,500. Now, keep in mind the pension reform, as they are proposing it, 3% of your salary will have to go towards it. Guess what? NIS is going up. There are reports of the national health insurance coming into being in 2025. So that will be an added deduction again to the salaries of these low-end workers. Goods are skyrocketing each year. All the union asked for, you want to do this reform? How about you do a pay and grade review to ensure that those category of workers, the lower end workers, the lower wage workers can buttress.
In an earlier report, Permanent Secretary at the DPA, Mindona Hille Marshall, disclosed that for the pension to be sustainable, workers will be required to contribute a percentage of their salary until retirement, as compared to the existing pension scheme, which will cost government millions if they do not introduce new pension reform legislation.
Right. So that was Brian Grimes there speaking about how much you have to pay for this, how much you have to pay for that, and that going up. But you know, Brian Grimes did not mention that his union, all right, his union actually intend to increase come next year the amount of money that a worker has to pay. But not only just a worker, you know. No. The lower end workers, the simpler workers within the public service, they're the ones who will be paying more. They are the ones who will be paying more. And that, to me, is a deception. So these guys out there said, well, this is expensive, this is that, and da-da-da-da-da-da, and he's going on and on and on and on and on. All right? But when it comes to the actual amount a person has to pay, a worker has to pay, the union, the guy did not tell the public that his union intends to increase the thing. So the people who are working from $0 to $1,500, they were actually paying $15. But come 2025, they will be made to pay $20, so a $5 increase. And that's the lower end workers, right? And that is the same lower end workers the man just spoke about. He just spoke about it in that piece. The lower end workers, right? So there's a level of hypocrisy in my view. All right, let me play it again for you.
Grimes disclosed that there are disparities in salaries among public officials who must be regularized before they can sustain regular contributions. To the soon should be implemented new pension scheme.
There is an issue with us having over 1,000 workers. 1,000 workers working for under $1,500. Now, keep in mind the pension reform, as they are proposing it, 3% of your salary will have to go towards it. Guess what? NIS is going up. There are reports of the national health insurance coming into being in 2025. So that will be an added deduction again to the salaries of these low-end workers. Goods are skyrocketing each year.
This guy was speaking about the lower end workers, and he mentioned 1,000 workers within the system. 1,000, they're working for under $1,500. But that's the same people who his union will be taking $5 from more. So they were paying $15 every month from their salary. Come 2025, they would be asked to pay $25 more. He's not mentioning that there. He would not mention that in the news because he doesn't want people to know that the union will be charging them more. These guys are tricky, you know. Very, very tricky. But he believes that he's smart. He's not smart. The guy is not smart because the government wants to help these workers, help them. That is why the government is coming up with this new pension plan, because the government wants them to go home with a pension. Listen to the most honorable Deacon Mitchell.
This pension plan is going to be applicable to 3,000 plus persons who do not have a pension. So if they leave the service now, whether it's on retirement age or whether they've worked for 10 or 15 years, they get nothing. So what the government is seeking to do is to give them a pension plan. And the government is contributing 3%, and we're asking them to contribute 3%. So that 3% is their money. The only issue is that we are simply saying, as opposed to spending all of it now, we are incentivizing you to save 3% of it, and we are matching an additional 3%.
Right.
And to be clear, for all of the years that you've been working, that you do not.
Right. So let's stick a pin there, because our beloved Prime Minister made a very valuable point. That 3% is like an investment, you know. It is not a tax, but here it is. Brian Grimes described the thing as a new tax or a tax. What's to that effect? Let me play for you that little interview that he did with Callistra, because I think it's important for you to hear how he described that 3%.
What will the pension reform look like? We are talking about workers having to pay a percentage of the salary, which is an additional tax. And most of the workers in question would be low salaried workers. So you can imagine.
Hold on, let's stick a pin. He said, what? It's like a what? A new tax?
What will the pension reform look like? We are talking about workers having to pay a percentage of the salary, which is an additional tax.
Right.
And most.
An additional tax. So he referred to it as an additional tax. That's the new pension that the government intends to roll out, where the worker contributes 3% and government contributes 3%. But it's an investment. It's not a tax, because they're getting that money back. All right? That is what they're actually doing. Because upon retirement, they will be getting a pension until they die. Right now, if they retire, they're retiring with nothing because they don't have a pension in place for them. All right? So, let's listen to a little piece of Brian Grimes there in that interview.
Of the workers in question would be low salaried workers. So you can imagine.
Right. So he's talking about the same low salaried workers, but they're the ones who the union is asking to pay more in union dues come 2025. So he's concerned that these workers going to be asked to pay 3% out of their salary towards a pension for them when they retire. He's concerned about that. He calls it an additional tax, when we know it's an investment in terms of the retirement, right? The pension. It's an investment so that they would get their pension upon retirement. But he's not saying the union is increasing the dues that they have to pay. No, you're not going to say that. That doesn't sound nice for him and his union. All right? Tactical.
Those unestablished workers or contract workers that, were, for lack of a better professional term, were seeing trouble in the service for eons, decades within the service, they will have to face an additional taxation, which will, affect their disposable income.
So this guy considers the 3% as a tax. This is what this guy believes. He believes that he's smart. This guy is a lunatic, right? In my belief. It is sad because this is the kind of people who are representing organizations like trade unions in this country. You have to wonder, who is this guy representing? Whose interest is he representing? Really? So he calls it a new tax. All right? The guy's an idiot. But let's get back to our beloved Prime Minister, the most Honorable Deacon Mitchell, because he was explaining this thing so nicely there. But I just thought I should make the point how Brian Grimes calls it. He calls it an additional tax. Our beloved Prime Minister sees it as an investment. I think any reasonable thinking person will see it as an investment in terms of their retirement, in terms of their pension. All right?
This pension plan is going to be applicable to 3,000 plus persons who do not have a pension. So if they leave the service now, whether it's on retirement age or whether they've worked for 10 or 15 years, they get nothing. So what the government is seeking to do is to give them a pension plan. And the government is contributing 3%, and we're asking them to contribute 3%. So that 3% is their money. The only issue is that we are simply saying, as opposed to spending all of it now, we are incentivizing you to save 3% of it, and we are matching an additional 3%. And to be clear, for all of the years that you've been working that you do not currently have a pension plan for, so that if you were leaving tomorrow, you will get nothing when you walk out, we are actually paying a past service contribution on the commencement of the pension plan. As in, we are going to fund a certain percentage to recognize the fact that you've already worked for whatever period of time with no payments going towards your pension. So I want to emphasize this. This is gain, because currently you have nothing. If you leave now, you get nothing. If you work until you retire, you get nothing. And we're saying that, you see the numbers. We're not talking 5 people here. We are talking 3,600 plus persons who currently face this situation. And so we also have to talk about sustainability. The PS provided the background as to where Grenada found itself and why it was forced to go into structural adjustment and take all of the painful policies it had to take because the management of the government's finances was not being done prudently. And so we cannot go back to a system where the pension is completely funded by the government, i.e. taxpayers, with no contribution from the employees. Such a plan will simply not be sustainable. And if we did it 5-10 years from now, we'll be right back where we currently are. Because the situation we're in has arisen by the fact that essentially we had an unsustainable human resource finance management policy in place, which saw 70% of our money going towards wages and salaries, and the rest going towards financing debt. I still want to repeat the call made by the PS. Very early, the department wrote to the Trade Unions Council, inviting them to take part in this process. They have never done so. Notwithstanding that, we will continue to engage with them, whether it's individually or collectively, if they want to do so. The consultant has been on island repeatedly throughout this process, and there's been several engagements, and we have no difficulty in addressing that. The PS didn't say this, but I'm going to say it. The Public Workers Union went to the lawyers who wrote the government. We've since responded to that letter. And even in that letter, although what was contained in the letter was hogwash, we have still indicated to them we are ready to meet, and we propose the date of 30th October. But I want to make it clear. We are committed to doing this. We are committed to making sure that we do not leave the current generation of workers who do not have a pension to find themselves 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now retiring with no pension in place. It will not be good for them. They will retire into poverty, as many people have been doing over the last several years. It is still going to be the government and taxpayers they're going to be running to for some kind of social safety net or social protection. And so we are committed to ensuring this happens. And I'll make the final point. This pension is not impacting the 4,000 plus public servants who currently fall under the existing pension scheme for pensions when they retire. So you have to appreciate the kind of burden the government is undertaking by seeking to keep in place the existing pension for established public servants and at the same time create another pension for another 3,600 plus and counting persons. That is what we are seeking to do, and we are committed to do it. And we would hope that those who say they champion the rights of working class and working people will in fact take part in the process to help shape the outcome, which is by any yardstick an improvement on the current circumstances that the 3,600 plus workers find themselves.
Yes. So I think our beloved Prime Minister said it best. He explained this thing nice and smooth, because as it stands now, these workers do not have anything going home with. They don't have a pension upon retirement, right? No pension. They're going without a pension, going home without a pension. So the government is trying its best to help these workers to make sure, please. Right. Right. So, all right.
This also goes for every Trinbagonian who going to live in a foreign land. Now is the time to come home and do something instead of staying out there and freezing. Because now, more than ever, we must show discipline, tolerance, and production to build a strong and better nation. I say that is the main foundation. So come let us go hand in hand, because this is our land. Come my brother, come my sister, and let us build a nation together.
Every build a nation together. I say come.
Yes. So I was saying that the government is trying to help these workers. That is exactly what the government is trying to do. The 3,672 workers, they are presently without a pension. When they retire, they're going home with no pension at all. The government, recognizing that, decided we cannot allow these workers to work for 20-something years, retire, and go home in poverty. Because if they retire, or when they retire, they still have to pay their water bill, they still have to pay their electricity bill, they still have to buy food, they still have to continue living, right? Where would that money come from? And they're not collecting any salary at the end of the month. Where would that money come from? So then they would have to rely on government poor relief assistance. They would have to rely on government giving them something every month. So what Brian Grimes should do is to work with the government so that this new pension plan going to come true and the workers will go home with a pension upon retirement. So sometimes you have to facilitate the process. Sometimes you have to help the process so that it can, come to life or light or be achieved. You shouldn't be a stumbling block or hindrance in making sure that those benefits come to the workers. So if you say that you represent workers, that is something that you should be happy about. Just as this guy was extremely happy when the government paid the pension and the gratuity to the people who were actually marching in the streets, protesting for the pension and gratuity. He was very, very elated, very, very happy.
Must be given tremendous applause and appreciation for the work they have done regarding the payment of the retroactive. Of course, we know about talks about pension reform, but we have ran the first leg and we have ran it well. And hundreds of people, in fact thousands, the whole of Grenada is happy for this because the retirees, they also have families and people are looking on. And I think it does a lot for social and economic justice in this country that the retroactive payment has been made.
Right, so Brian Grimes making me laugh, That's the same Brian Grimes there, yes. Yeah, he was happy that the workers were paid their pension and their gratuity. That's workers who worked and went home with no money under the NNP time. The NDC came into power and the NDC paid the pension, and paid the gratuity. All right? I'll call you outside. I'll call you back. Yeah. Hello? Yeah. Wait, outside by me? No, I'm wrapping up, All right. Yeah, hold on here. Right. So I am saying it's important to understand here. That's a very good friend there to answer that call there. So you have to understand the context. That's the same Brian Grimes. So I decided to play that so that you can understand the picture. All right? Understand. Because this guy is tying up himself. It's confusing. But folks, I thought I should share all that with you. We're going to dive into it deeper during the week. But that's just a teaser. That's just a taste. I'm gathering the material so I can share it with you so we can have a deeper conversation about pension reform, about regularization, about workers and the benefits that they have gotten from the NDC administration. And this government is pro-worker, not anti-worker, pro-worker. They like the workers and they're giving them great many things. Great many benefits are coming to the workers. Folks, I want to wish you all the best on this Sunday. I will be back with you tomorrow, God's willing, starting from 8 in the a.m.